Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into research for California, a white paper brought to us by BDS Analytics. On the line with us is Dan Kimmis, our CBD correspondent with Good CBD Products. According to this white paper, quote, California was the first to legalize medical cannabis with the passage of the Compassionate Use Act of 96, aka California Prop 215. And that market grew to nearly $3 billion in annual spending by 2017, the biggest in the world. So investors and out-of-state operators who had turned their attention to what was always a smaller market elsewhere have shifted their focus back to the Golden State. That makes sense given the forecast that legal cannabis spending in California will grow at a 19% compounded annual growth rate to $7.2 billion in 2024, 40% larger than Canada and 253% larger than the next largest state, Colorado. So the load of new regulatory demands and taxes and enabling Prop 64 passed in November 2016 or layered on afterwards, which brought two waves of extinctions that crashed through all segments of the supply chain. The first came shortly after the January 1st, 2018 launch of the adult use market that was accompanied by a significant decline in dollar sales and thousands of business failures or decisions to go rogue. And the second came in July of 2018 with the implementation of the highly stringent Category 2 lab testing, leading to a death of product and other surge in business failures. And then I would add personally onto that the death of CBD that we saw last year. You can't have edibles or beverages. And so anyone who wanted to switch from that highly regulated market to CBD can't do that either. So there have been several waves of California crashing. We saw that Weed Maps, for the last 18 months have been publishing non-licensed dispensaries or retail shops, and have just now been forced to stop doing that, whereas Leafly voluntarily stopped doing that 18 months ago. So a lot of things going on in California. I guess we'll have to see what happens.
When it gets real, right? And all of a sudden, things that were bringing revenue, so publishing all those gray dispensaries, right? Stuff like that where, again, the unintended consequences, the things you didn't think about late at night when you were like, oh, I can hardly wait till this is all legalized. And then last but not least, on top of that, we're seeing it in Washington right now because things just don't just change. They change and then they keep changing. And so if you're a business operator, the bankroll and the energy you need to be able to stay nimble for a few years while these things sort themselves out, it's amazing to watch these operators. It really is.
Absolutely. One thing I noticed that's interesting is the top 5 brands only have about 10% of the market share. I think in Washington and other established states, we've seen that the top 5 brands have closer to 80% market share. So I think that's one difference with California, maybe. Also, going back into the article, quote, out-of-state vertical MSOs or multi-state operators, they're seizing the California opportunity through the supply-side brand acquisitions. So as with Illinois-based multi-state operator Cresco Labs, they acquired Origin House and then Curaleaf's all-stock deal to acquire California's concentrate brand Select Oils. The population in California is 40 million with 2.7 billion gross domestic product. It's bigger than all countries other than the US, China, Japan, and Germany. So they're 5th on that list in the world in terms of GDP. Back into the article, it says the California market is a microcosm of national battles for market share to come into cannabis. The state has counties and individual cities bigger than many U.S. states, and cultivators, manufacturers, distributors, and retailers are amassing local licenses and developing strategies to compete for markets across whole states, federal legalization, and entire countries, and then eventually the world. California definitely wants to dominate in the way that they have with wine.
I just want to reiterate, counties and cities bigger than whole states, right? Again, it's one of those things where when people say, well, why do you guys do so much time in Cali? Oh, there's reasons. There is reasons we do some time in Cali.
The 5th largest GDP in the world says a lot for sure. And so here's some comments from the editor. They had forecasting. It turns out that California cannabis companies is not geared up for the doubling of revenue seen at the advent of adult use legalization elsewhere. So more of them might have avoided the dual extinction events in January and July of last year had they prepared for it. I don't know if they weren't paying attention or whatever. And the article goes on to say that the transition to adult use sales has gone so well in prior states that they underestimated the drag on legal sales at California with local bans, high taxes, and expensive compliance requirements provided or approved to be. So in $11.3 billion total cannabis market in 2017, $8.3 billion was already being spent in extra legal channels. So for the first time anywhere, adult use legalization actually prompted the growth in illicit sales in California in 2018.
You know, the unintended consequences and watching this stuff from the ground. Because it's one thing to read, it's a whole nother thing to see things like a resurgent black market, see things like lax enforcement, right? One of the things going on in Cali right now is the enforcement side of things is its own complete, they're not ready. And so if you're trying to play by the rules, should you? Of course. But, geez, will you get caught if you don't? And so all of these things come together to make a really chaotic, soup there on the ground.
No doubt. And yet the rest of the cannabis industry can learn a lot from the California experience. So to finish off the article, it says that the most important of the lessons of California governing needs to learn that the tax rates may or may not affect the consumer behavior in general, but they can certainly do when they're set to high levels on a product widely available through an established illicit pipeline. Washington State has some of the highest taxes, but they have some of the lowest prices. But that's simply because owners are separated from the retail and the grow side, which is different than Colorado. Colorado has same owners, or essentially could be the same owners that grow and sell. They have that ability. Washington State cannot do that. So they have price control. And so there's a lot more competition here. And then if you have that opportunity, like California is one of the world's biggest producers, at least in North America, one of the biggest areas for illicit grow. Vancouver and Alaska has some outdoor that comes through as well, but California has been doing it forever. So if there's anywhere that's going to go back to the illicit market, it's going to be California. So they have to be careful with those tax rates. And they're justifying those taxes by promising the money to be enforcement against illicit operations. And we just haven't seen that in any state, really.
The news is just starting to show things like, raids on illegal dispensaries. And it's kind of interesting if you think about it, because, again, when you go in, one of the things you don't really find yourself doing a lot is asking yourself, is this place real? And yet, apparently, and, we'll go see, but again, apparently every now and then you can actually find a complete black market op. So we'll see. It's one way to find out, right? Put on your boots and go stand around.
So looking at some cannabis on demand from in California, it looks like vape is still really popular, 35% for what people want, and then 31% from concentrates. So vapes and shatter lead the concentrate market in California. California really does lead the U.S. market, if you will, with not just cannabis. Popular strains leave California. They hit Colorado about 6 months later, and then 6 months after that hit Washington. And we see that with the automotive industry, whether it's utilities or environmental factors. California really does lead a lot of regulation. We're seeing that with cannabis as well. And the popularity in products and strains kind of come out of California first. So definitely want to keep track of that. Looking at some mergers and acquisitions, there's some money flowing into to California a little bit late. People were kind of sitting on the sidelines. So we're seeing a lot more people diving in. Price of flower is probably going to be coming back down. There's supply issues. There's onboarding issues with not enough stores. All these issues that we've seen in every other state. And so I expect that to be kind of normal. We can kind of compare Washington and Oregon with a lot of the strains, the the ways that people are consuming, from flower to pre-rolls to concentrates, but just the sheer size of California. It's a huge compounded annual growth rate, whether it's medical or otherwise. Spending is trending up. Flower continues to dominate. And then transactions based on the time of day between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. is 42.0% of your sales. So there's that. And then looking at the spending in Washington compared to California, between average basket sizes, California is like twice as much. They're spending $60 to $70 in Washington. The average person's spending between $28 and $30. I don't know if that's because it's new or they want to try different things, but we're just kind of seeing that, Washington, people can learn from our mistakes, and they can also learn in California what trends are coming out. So really just being on the West Coast and paying attention can help you in so many different ways. So you're going to be down in Portland for the Science Cannabis Conference today and tomorrow. It opens up. I'm going to meet you down there on Friday, cruise the floor, check out anything that's new, neat, or niche. What do you expect to see at the Science Cannabis Conference?
Well, the emergent information around different yields from, like, we'll say rare cannabinoids and that sort of thing. So I expect some emergent data on that stuff. CBG, THCV, etc. This one has a lot of, as you know, you and I, we run with some, basically some really smart people, okay? And this one has a bunch of the super smarty smarts at it, the high intellect crew. And then, old friends. And then last but not least, the thing that's interesting about this show to me is I always find one or two things on the floor that are, again, emergent, new or niche or whatever, right? And so that's the other thing I know, is that what I know is there's going to be something I don't know about there. And I like that.
Yeah, Josh Crosney comes out with some pretty good stuff. I like his event. It's a 2-day event. He has some good booths. People kind of come out from the woodworks in terms of the Cannabis Science Conference. It is more of that scientific aspect. You do get some docs and jocks sitting on a panel talking about active cannabis lifestyle. And so the people that it brings, I think, is a good caliber relative to some of the other events, which are just kind of different or more of the same. This has its own unique feel to it and different people. So always look forward to this one in Portland.
Yeah, the other thing I want to see is I want to understand how the hemp growth curve impacts the show. Because, again, it was a year ago, last time they were in Portland, right? Their yearly show. And then so much has happened, right? And so, again, it'll be really interesting to see, is the show 10% hemp? Is it 30% hemp? What's going on with CBD and the educational tracks and stuff like that? Really excited.
Should be a good one. So come back and check that out after Friday when we report on it. So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.